I don't think people in the States realize how lucky we are to not have to deal with these things over our skies. Thank God, because you watch that, and if you're not from that region, um, you know, that looks terrifying. That looks absolutely terrifying. Um, what's up? I want to be debated. Glad to have you here. So glad you're here. So yeah, you should do my introduction, right? I get so taken aback by what's going on right now. It just totally messes with me. But you're watching the Gabriel Speaks Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Don't forget, like, subscribe, all that stuff if you haven't done so. Really appreciate it. Really helps out the algo and all the things. Tonight, we're going to do something I don't typically do. Typically, I'm covering, there's always a component of the news and current events because that has a lot to do with what's happening in the UFO world, in the conspiracy world, in the paranormal world, believe it or not. So it's a little different for me to just cover just the news because it's something I try to stay away from mostly because it seems to people get infuriated and people get enraged and they get very defensive and they take things very personally. And I understand that. It's your right to believe what you believe. Thank God we live in this country where we can express that for the most part, right? Like I couldn't be doing this stream if I was in Iran right now. There's no fucking way. Like they would kill me. So there are certain things we're privileged to have here, and I will try to respect everyone's opinion. Anyone that's here that has an opinion, and try to look at things with an open mind. But also, as I do in all of my other topics, I'm not gonna tiptoe and bullshit. Like I'm gonna keep it real and how I feel about these topics. So we're gonna mostly this episode is gonna cover what's going on in Iran. We're going to get a little into the SAVE Act that is trying to make its way through Congress so the president can sign off on it, that has to do with elections, specifically presenting ID or providing proof of your citizenship before casting your ballot, which you think wouldn't be a big deal, but it kind of is. And I always say when something doesn't seem to make much sense, like doesn't make much common sense, it's usually the lawyers. There's something there that is a legality that maybe we don't understand, or maybe it's much more complex than what you can just put into a talking point. And so I think the same thing is happening here with Iran that happened with Iraq, is we're getting lost in the speech. Before we went into Iraq, it was that they were helping terrorists and that they had weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. In fact, Osama bin Laden couldn't even go to Iraq. He was banned from Iraq, could not go there. Saddam hated him. And that's typical when you have two guys with big egos in the Middle East, right? This country's only big enough for the one of us. And it's interesting that we put Saddam Hussein in power in Iraq. And so that's a whole nother story. But essentially, we've got this guy, Saddam Hussein. We put him in power in Iraq because you have these three main different religions that will literally tear each other to shreds. Like they will literally drill holes in each other's heads. Like, it is awful, the things that they did to each other once Saddam was gone. We helped put a dictator like Saddam Hussein in charge. And if you don't believe me, like, Detroit, Michigan gave Saddam Hussein the key of the city. Can't make this shit up. Okay. So we put Saddam in power, and the dictator helped keep in check these three religions that would literally kill each other, right? Because they were afraid to break the law. Like, yeah, I want to kill all these Shias, or I want to kill all these Sunnis, or whatever. But at the same time, I don't want to get tortured and have my family murdered and all this other stuff by Saddam Hussein, who is in power. So they weren't doing it. So it was a terrible situation on top of a terrible situation, but it was the best resolution at the time. Well, you can argue about why Bush decided to attack Iraq. The real reason, all you want. You can go back and forth. Some people say it was to get back for Saddam trying to kill his dad. Some people say it was because Saddam Hussein and Iraq was considering taking the euro instead of the dollar for oil, which would have drastically weakened the strength of the dollar. That's a pretty good reason. And then you had the bullshit reason, and I say bullshit because we never to this day found any evidence of weapons of mass destruction or biological weapons in Iraq. Did Saddam Hussein use biological weapons on the Kurds? Yes, he did. Look, I'm not sticking up for Saddam Hussein. Fuck that guy. They're all pieces of shit. Just like here, our leadership, they're all pieces of shit. That's how they get into power. But nonetheless, he did use those weapons on the Kurds, which put him in this class of leader that was willing to use biological weapons against their own people. Sounds familiar, right? Sounds like what's happening in Syria, right? Or before. I say right now, geez, I'm in a time warp. But 5-6 years ago, what was happening in Syria? Same thing. You have a leader that's using biological weapons on his own people. What the fuck? It's an interesting thing there. So we decide, for whatever reason, we're going into Iraq. We're going to topple Iraq. We're going to tell the people we're liberating Iraq, but really what we're doing is setting up Iraq for business. Nobody partied harder after the launch of the Iraq War than military contractors. I mean, it was like a 2-3 week long cocaine-fueled party, man. It was just crazy. All the money they were going to be making because of Iraq. And that's what they did. They went there and they made billions of dollars. And some of those contractors even like murdered people for no reason and all kinds of terrible shit. Because we actually contracted out troops. What the fuck? We're the United States of America. Why are we hiring troops? We have troops. So just like Iraq, we are going in, guns blazing into Iran with no fucking plan. We've blown up the last 2, possibly 3 leaders, so we don't even have anybody to negotiate with. How do you negotiate with a country whose leader you keep killing? Also, getting back to the language, the reason they haven't called this a war is because a war requires an act of Congress. The president can't just go and declare war on anybody. Oh, but since 9/11, if you label someone a terrorist or an organization a terrorist organization, then all of a sudden you have carte blanche to perform whatever military operation you want to perform. Things like kidnapping a country's president and his wife, and telling the vice president, look, do what we say or you're next. You know we can do it. We just showed you we can do it. We'll do it again and again and again until you give us what we want. The president has led us into Iran and has no plan. You do not murder the second in command, the third in command. What are we going to do? We're going to go the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. We're going to murder anyone who's in a position to negotiate with us. That's insanity. And behind that are literally tens of millions of citizens. Citizens, maybe they have different religious beliefs. Who knows? When's the last time you've been to Iran? But citizens nonetheless. They have families, they have children. They try to live their lives in a good way for the most part, just like we do. They are not less than us. They are us. And I don't know. I feel like I haven't declared war on Iran. My president did. They've been trying to push the U.S. president into attacking Iran for 50 years. Do you know why no president did it? Take a guess. It's a bad fucking idea. It's insane. So we're going to go over this conference. I don't know. I guess it's not a press conference. They tried to make it seem like an impromptu thing, but it was definitely like a press conference, but in the Oval Office. And Trump was at the Resolute desk and answering these questions. And I've cut in a few segments to kind of show the similarity between what we're getting now and what we got in Iraq. So I hope you don't mind that. And also, I hate to say this, but watching President Trump at this conference, and I've cut it up, I've edited out a lot of the fluff, okay, but watching President Trump at this conference yesterday, there were moments where I was like concerned. Like, are you not getting enough sleep? What's going on? Because he was like cuddling up to a B2 model and just weird shit. Weird shit. I don't care what you say. Struck me as fucking weird. Okay, we got a comment here. They don't want to make deals. They want to install a completely new government with the Persian and Kurdish forces from your sources. Hey, that would be fantastic. If they get the Kurds in control, wonderful, because we know the Kurds have always been kind of the toned down version that's willing to work with the West. So I'm all for it. They've worked with us in the past. They've helped us on critical missions. I just don't know if that is reality. I think that's one of those things that's very easily said, but to do it, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. I mean, if our military can pull it off, fantastic. But our military is not like a political project manager, right? Like our military, they get the job done. It's up to the politicians and the engineers and the smart folks to take it from there. Counting on the military after we turn half of this country into rubble to like rebuild. I mean, we do have the Corps of Engineers, but is that where there are just so many concerns I have? Cost on top, being the last of which, but being a big one is cost. Like, what is this gonna fucking cost? So here's Trump yesterday. Let me switch out the video here. Oh, nope, I'm sorry. That was yesterday too, but that was not the one that I made. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start with, I'm going to let y'all know, we're going to start with Trump's announcement of the war, and I've cut that down. And then we're going to get into some of the commonalities that I've seen between this and Iraq, because Iraq was not that long ago, y'all. If you're too young to remember it, I'm sorry. If you're too old to remember it, I'm sorry, but it happened. It was a invasion, a very terrible invasion, again, in the Middle East with zero planning. And here's Trump announcing our military operation, wink, wink, against Iran.
United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, and just
again, terror, 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 terror. Now they know they've got to get these guys labeled as terrorists, so they are laying it on extra thick. So much of it is in the language.
Recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again. They can never have a nuclear weapon. In Operation Midnight Hammer last...
Doesn't North Korea have a nuclear weapon? I think they do.
Last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. They just wanted to practice evil. They rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons.
There will always be some uncertainty about how quickly he can acquire a nuclear weapon, but we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. This will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously. I remember the fact that he has invaded 2 countries before. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway, 75.
Okay. Now, y'all heard that. The man's 75 years old. That was his excuse at the end there. I didn't make that up. That was W. Bush's literal quote, a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. Ukraine. And then under his breath, Iraq too. Anyway, I'm 75 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. This is what we're dealing with, folks. That this class of people, they are willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of lives, your kids and my kids, and then joke about it later. I'm not a tree hugger. I was in the U.S. Army. I understand pacifism is a beautiful idea, but there are some fucking bad people out there. Bad people. And I understand you have to deal with it sometimes. But I don't like being misled, being lied to, and I don't like what I see as far as a lack of an actual military and political plan for this. I want to be debated, says they're going to try to put the Sunnis in charge. Lord, I hope that happens. I really do. Or the Kurds, the Kurds in charge. And I hope that happens. Because the Kurds have worked with us in the past. We know the Kurds aren't quite as extreme as some of the other groups. I just hope that there is a plan. Instead of this, let's just turn all the missile, bays and all of the sites to rubble and invade. I guess one of the reasons it bothers me so much is I feel like we're just doing what Israel wants, right? Like we're just like, it's the same complaint we would make about NATO, from years past, prior engagements. It was, they're using our military. We're not really getting to have a say in what's going on with it. They're just using our stuff. And it kind of feels like that's what's going on here. I don't know, but it sort of feels like we're just doing what they tell us to do. Okay, Mr. Bibi, you got it. What do you want us to blow up? Oh, you want us to invade? Okay. And in this segment, there's a reporter asks him a question about invasion, like ground forces invading. And it sounds like, yep, that's what we're going to be doing.
I know for a fact that he's poisoned his own people, patient and strong in the values that we adhere to. But we can't let the world's worst leaders blackmail, threaten, hold freedom-loving nations hostage with the world's worst weapons.
So I guess kind of my question here is this the standard for war now? Is this, if we have a dictator that seems to be running amok, not making any friends on the geopolitical front, has a deep religious tone, almost like a kind of a cult vibe? but they control everything in the country. The budget, the GDP, everything. They control everything. And if that person is a person that we can't work with, or our allies can't work with, and they could eventually, look, I don't know how we're going to tell every country not to have a nuke. Eventually, some of these countries probably already have AI telling them how to do it. So I don't know how we're going to, is that the line now? If they can have access to a nuke at any point and we don't trust the leader, boom, we're taking you out. I just want to know, is that the deal now? Because I've got a young boy I'm raising, and I want to know, like, what's the standard? Are we going to be looking at drafts in 10 years? Because this is like just how we handle our business now. We just take out countries that don't go along and don't get along. I'm not saying that's specifically the case with Iran. But his standard was, look, they've threatened that they're going to develop nuclear weapons. They are bad, evil people. They say that a bunch. They've killed some of their own citizens. And they need to be toppled. And then with the asshole in Venezuela, it was, oh, he's a drug dealer and he's misappropriating funds and he's helping push drugs to the United States. And therefore, and since those drugs are causing some kids to overdose, then it's a terrorist attack and they're terrorists, so we can just go and get them. Now in Iran, because it's known that Iran has helped Hamas, and Hamas has attacked Israel since I was born. They've been launching RPGs at Israel. And Iran has funded a lot of that. Like that has been proven time and time again. You can't really debate that. I mean, you can, but you'd be wasting your breath after you read the information that's out there. So Iran is a country that worries us, but so is North Korea. So are we attacking North Korea next? Like this is my concern. That this is the future of a military state, not a republic. George Washington, I believe, said, if you have a standing army, then they're going to want to work, or something to that effect. Didn't believe in having a standing army. Believed in militias. Like, it's 2026, right? I don't know about militias. I'm just saying we have the largest military in the world, the largest amount of weapons by far. Not people, but weapons. We have the largest amount of weapons, dangerous weapons, by far. But it's not going to stay that way if we are using all of them. Like, we're sending them to Ukraine to be used. We're now using them in Iran. We've been using them all around the world for different terrorist operations, intel operations. It's like supply and demand. These are things like we have to think about. And I just get concerned because I feel like, is the president thinking about this? I don't know. I don't know. And we'll go through this and y'all tell me if I'm just overreacting.
On board with the current war in Iran?
I think that I know what you're trying to do, Phil. You're trying to drive a wedge between members of the administration, between me and the president. What the president said consistently, going back to 2015, and I agreed with him, is that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We have taken this military action under the president's leadership. I think all of us, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should pray for its success and pray for the safety of our troops. That's the approach that I've taken. Make it as successful as possible.
So there's no hesitation, given your past statements, with the current operation?
What do you mean there's no hesitation with my past statements?
Trump and I believe that America ought to be tough and America ought to have a strong foreign policy. But when people like Kamala Harris send our sons and daughters, our young people, to fight in stupid wars, it is the young generation that carries the burden of that. We're going to stop sending our young people to faraway lands. We are not the policemen of the world. We need to use our young people here at home. My honest guidance to those young men, and I think their concerns are very legitimate, but if you're worried about the world spinning out of control, if you're worried about a military draft, if you're worried about, God forbid, a world war, the best way to prevent it is to vote for Donald Trump. And I really believe that.
And our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran, right? It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country.
The bigger problem here, if we zoom out, is, look, and I hate to say this, but America is not good at micromanaging wars in the Middle East.
Look, JD's been...
So, what do you mean? The comments I made in the past. What are you talking about? Those comments were... And those weren't the only ones, y'all. I could have dug out so many. So many of him and his boy Trump here saying that they're not for the wars. They don't want to start any more wars. They don't want to be in any wars. They want to get us out of wars. It's your kids. It's our money. It's our resources. It's just stupid, stupid, stupid. We shouldn't do it. And then as soon as they get in office, they're starting all these other wars, or they're stopping all these other conflicts and potential conflicts around the planet, but they're getting us into shit. We're blowing up boats on the high seas. We're kidnapping presidents of countries. We're full on attacking Iran and not calling it a war, calling it a military operation. And this is what's funny, friends. I want you to note how many times Donald Trump and his cohorts here refer to Iran as a war. After selling us, well, trying to sell us that it's a military operation, it's not a war.
Great. But here's the simple thing, and I have, some people, I don't want wars. I want wars less than almost anybody. I've watched Iran for a long time. I've called them out 20 years ago when I was a civilian that liked watching the world. And they're violent, vicious people. The leadership, violent, vicious people. They're violent people. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it. And sometimes I'll have some of the people that, feel very strongly, like I do about wars. And I say, do you think Iran is violent? And do you think their people are violent? Yes, leadership. Do you think they should have a nuclear weapon? Which is massive power. I don't even want to discuss how powerful, because it's depressing. And they said, no, they shouldn't have. Definitely they shouldn't have. I said, and you don't want to fight war? No, we don't want to fight war. So these are naive people that frankly are stupid. If you believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon, there's something wrong with you, because they would use it within, the only question is within 1 hour if they get it, or 1 day. They will use it, and they will...
It's like I can't think of the term, like a false argument or fake argument. Like, nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, dude. I don't know anybody that's like, fuck yeah, give them a nuke. Let's see what happens. Let's see what they do. I just want to see if they'll do the right thing. I don't think anybody is on that page. So it's not, do you want Iran to have a nuke? It's, do you want to go to war with Iran because they might develop a nuke? But by saying like, oh, you want them to have a nuke? It makes you look like you want, it's just so stupid. Like it's like a schoolyard argument. It's like what bullies do. It's not educated in any sense. It's just stupid to say something like that.
Blow up the entire Middle East, not just Israel. They'll start with Israel, but they will.
Yeah, do you want them to have a nuke? They're going to blow up all the Middle East, and then they're going to blow us up.
And you got to see that when they unexpectedly started sending missiles to every country within 1,000 miles of them. I mean, they're blowing up countries that were neighbors, not necessarily some friends. They actually were blowing up some friends. They were blowing up the people that handle their accounts. They're sending thousands of missiles into countries that didn't expect to be in the war.
All right, so I had to pause it here because every once in a while you got to do a little fact check. And when Trump said they're sending thousands of missiles into other countries, I thought, that might be an interesting fact to check. And so I looked it up, and basically a reasonable evidence-based range of missiles that Iran has fired since February 28th. That's when we first attacked, essentially, and Israel invaded. Since February 28th, Iran has fired between 700 and 1,200 missiles. Around 500 of those are ballistic and cruise missiles. They were fired in the early phase. Most of those were done by March 5th. 300 of those were fired at Israel alone by the 10th day. About 430 missiles launched on the first day, February 28th. Hundreds more across Gulf countries, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other smaller countries. 314 missiles at the UAE alone through today, through March 17th. So it's a lot of missiles, 700 to 1,200 missiles, but it's not thousands. So not shocking, right? But it was just that one thing I decided to randomly fact check, and we got a fail on that one. So, what's interesting also is that the majority were fired in the first few days, and then their launch rate essentially collapsed by about 90% after our strikes on the launchers. So that's our military being badass. That's what they fucking do, right? They kick ass and take names. They do their job. They do it very, very effectively. And they won't let you down. But you got to know what you're doing after that, because that's not their specialty.
And if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's horrible Iran nuclear deal, which I did in my first term, one of the dumbest deals, perhaps the dumbest deal because of the danger involved, you would have had them have a nuclear weapon 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and they would have used it, blown up the Middle East, and they would have then come after us. Just give me that bomber, Andrews. Let me just hug that little sucker. Give me that bomber over there. Thank you. You knew immediately which one. This looks small, but in person it's very big. Because it's the only plane capable of carrying a 200,000-pound bomb. So I don't know how they do it, because it's very sleek and nice, but it carries a lot of weapons and there's a lot of bombs. But had I not sent this incredible machine times numerous others to hit Iran at midnight with no moon, dead dark. Every single bomb was dropped right down the chute that it was supposed to hit. How they do it, who knows?
Fucking piloted the jet myself.
Nobody else can figure. No other country can do it. You would have had a nuclear war that would have evolved into World War III. In 2 weeks, we have decimated them. They have.
What the fuck? So now now he's saying if we didn't attack them, if we didn't launch this attack that Israel's been trying to push us into for 50 years, but if you say that, you're, some kind of anti-whatever. But it's a fact. So we had to do that to avoid World War III because they were going to have a nuke and they were going to blow us up with nukes after they blew up Israel and other parts of the Middle East. Y'all, do you understand? Oh, that is so crazy. Like, these things don't happen overnight. It's not like all of a sudden Iran's going to have a nuclear ballistic missile or an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile that is just accurate as a dime and could blow up New York City. That wasn't going to happen. They were decades, at least a decade. Let's say they get a ton of help from AI and somebody else. I don't even know what. But let's say they're able to like quadruple the speed at which it would normally take them to get there. They're still looking at like 5-10 years, and they have to do multiple tests before they get there. You can't just shoot it once and hope it works. It does not work that way. So it's insanity to think that if we wouldn't have attacked him on February 28th, that within a short while we would have been nuked. And also to say a couple months ago in June that he obliterated. Remember, y'all, he used that word. He obliterated the nuclear facilities that Iran had. That was like less than a year ago. And now we have to launch an attack. There is 100% more to this than we're being told, for sure.
They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. They have no anti-aircraft weapons. They have no leadership. The leadership is gone. But then they set up a new leadership to go and name a new leader, and that leadership is gone. And now they think maybe the sun is gone. They're all gone. My biggest problem is I have no idea who we're talking to because nobody ever heard of any of these people. They're all dead.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I was saying at the start of this episode, is that if you keep killing the person that's supposed to be the leader, how are you going to negotiate with the leader? I know one thing. If I'm next up to be the leader, I'm going to be like, fuck that. Can I pass? Can you go to the next guy? I'll be the best assistant you ever had in the next room, because they keep killing the person that is supposed to be in charge. Now, this guy here, this was, I believe, the son, Khamenei's son. He wasn't supposed to be so Khamenei we killed, and then could have been his son, but it wasn't. They went with this other guy, one of his assistants who'd been with him for a long time, because they didn't think the son was quite ready and weren't quite sure if he was ever going to be ready. However, that second guy dies. So then it definitely defaults to this joker here, Khamenei, who we attacked and supposedly injured just recently. So he's either dead or like mutilated, or I don't know. Something happened with him where he was hurt. I think badly hurt, to where we don't know if he's even alive or not. So if we don't even know who the leaders are. And if we keep killing them, how are we going to negotiate and end this war? Somebody tell me. I just, it's so ridiculous to me to kill the head. In fact, God, it's been a while since I had to know the rules of the Geneva Convention, but I think that's actually one of the rules, is you can't assassinate another country's leader. And I don't think it matters if they're a dickhead or not. I think it's just you can't assassinate them is how that goes. So we're kind of breaking the rules. And we're definitely breaking the rules. Trump is definitely breaking the rules by not saying what this is, which is a war, even though you're about to watch him call it a war several times. Although technically, legally, he should be calling it a military operation. And that's at the very beginning what he started with, calling it a military operation, because this is a military operation to cut the head off the snake of a terrorist organization, even though we are attacking an entire country's military infrastructure. It's one way to do it. I'll give him that. It is one way that you can do it.
We took the worst country in 50 years and maybe longer from the ideological standpoint, a country that wanted to blow up the world, a country that is sick, and it has a religious fervor. And when you add religion, you know, people don't realize more people died in religious wars than every other war put together. Isn't that a beautiful thing? You know, I used to look at it and I said, it's a piece of art, but how can it be effective? It's so stealth. Think of it, Peter. 1 a.m, it flies in, and they say, sir, they're in Iranian airspace. And I say, oh, and I'm watching it from the Situation Room with a couple of other very smart people, including some good generals, real generals, not television generals. And all of a sudden you see that dive, they start diving, and sure, and you see him, 30,000, 20,000. Boy, I said, that was a lot. They went down fast. They know they...
Okay. Am I crazy, or is President Trump seem to be losing it a little bit? I know if you love Trump, I get it. That's what I was saying. Like, he seems like maybe he's just tired. Maybe he's not gotten a lot of sleep since the war started. I mean, February 28th, it's the 17th of March. So it's been several weeks where we've been at a war he started. But when you're cuddling up to a statue and telling stories about how cool it is to watch stealth bombers fly down out of the sky and stuff, like, what? It's very, very interesting to see from the President of the United States.
Coming, and they're smart, and they never saw them, and they're firing a little bit, but they don't know what they're firing at because they can't see a thing. And then you hear the biggest explosions that anybody's ever heard. Those are the biggest bombs. Outside of nuclear, those are the biggest bombs. What a great country. I built it during my first term. I built it. I didn't know I'd have to use it this much in my second term. When they say death to America, you should believe them, because that's what they would have. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it. But they never had the chance. I never gave them the chance to use it. And other presidents should have done. I spoke to one of the former presidents who I actually like. I actually speak to some. I do like some people. It'd be shocking. And he said, I wish I did what you did. General Soleimani, had I not killed him, that was the beginning of their downfall, because had he not gone, it's possible that we would not be this far advanced in destroying Iran because he was a really good general. He was a vicious, horrible man, but he was a brilliant general. And he was looking to knock out 5 of our military bases at one time. And the man that died with him was his counterpart in Iraq. And they never found somebody to replace him in terms of the genius. I knocked him out. And that was a big step, knocking him out. A lot of people at the time, you remember that, Peter? A lot of people. Had I not terminated, remember that, Stephen? You remember? Oh, yeah. They were all going, no, dude, this is not, that deal was a disaster. That was a road to a nuclear weapon. They would have had it 3 years ago, and it would have been used.
Okay, I'm just saying, this is the part at Thanksgiving dinner where I walk out of the room and my uncle's going on and on about, what the fuck? What are you even talking about? He asked him a simple question about targets in Iran, and he babbles for like 20 minutes. I mean, I have cut this down, y'all. It's already cringy enough. I have cut this down. If you go watch the whole, I think it's like a 45-minute, 50-minute interview video, it is so cringy. And there are so many parts where I literally was a little concerned. Like, fuck, are you okay, President Trump? Like, somebody needs to get this man some Ambien stat. Make sure he gets a good night's sleep, is all I'm saying.
Used, I would say, 2 to 3 years ago, and it would have been used in the Middle East. And, by the way, after they were finished that, they were coming over here.
If Iran, as you said, totally obliterated, got the missiles, got the first 2 rounds of leadership, Air Force gone, Navy gone, can we wrap this war up this week?
Yeah, sure. Could.
Will we?
I don't think so, but it'll be soon. Won't be long. It'll be wrapped up soon. We're going to have a much safer world. I had an obligation to do this. I didn't want to, I call it.
So he says he has an obligation to do this. And I bring up the Strait of Hormuz because in this interview, again, if you go and watch the full interview, it gets brought up several times. And that's why apparently he felt like he had an obligation. Now, I believe he felt he had an obligation to Israel because he certainly kisses Bibi's ring and does essentially whatever the man tells him to do. I think that's why. But he says in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has basically used it as a negotiating tool, a negotiating tactic to get things they want. And essentially, he's doing the world a service by clearing out these bullies at the Strait of Hormuz, that is Iran. And that's why he believes what he's doing is kind of a service to the people. And it's interesting because he's going to get into it here in a minute, but you know, he talks about sacrificing.
I don't want to make this journey.
He's about to talk about sacrificing, and I think this is really, really interesting.
The highest stock market in history. We had low gas prices. Everything was good. And I know exactly. I know what, you're going to do it, and people are going to raise the price of oil, and that's good. But I know that. But that's a very small thing compared to allowing them to have. You want to see a stock market go down? Start letting them hit you with nukes. I think it's a very small price to pay.
So that's the quote. I think it's a very small price to pay, says the billionaire. Says the guy who never has to pay a dime for oil and gas, most likely, anymore. But uses a ton of it on the American taxpayer's dime. How much is gas where you are? I know in the Bay, it's up to over $6 a gallon. Where I am, I know diesel is over 6, close, just under 6 at some locations. But if the diesel goes up, then everything we purchase is going to go up. Like any good you get at a market comes from these trucks. What, 95% probably come from these trucks. And if they're having to shell out more to get the stuff to the locations, obviously that's going to trickle down. And then your 99-cent item is now $3.25. That's my crazy cat. I'm sorry, y'all. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Now, you and I, yes, we're going to feel that pinch. But we didn't sign up for this. Did you? Did they call you and ask you, hey, how do you feel about going to war with Iran? We're curious. Because it might cause higher gas prices for a little while. But they're terrorists, and we've got to stop them. Even though Iran has been in that region acting as terrorists and sponsoring Hamas since pretty much Israel's been there. But for some reason, right now is the moment we've got to take them out. Right now is the moment because Trump is on his second term and Bibi knows he isn't going to get another shot like this. A guy that literally will do anything he tells him to do. He just has to ask the right way. They've got Trump on lock. They know exactly how to get what they want from Trump. I don't even think it takes blackmail. I think it just takes knowing the right things to say and the right things to offer. All right. Let's get back to these tough sacrifices President Trump is making.
To a large, it's a big chess game at a very high level. It's a very high level chess, the highest. And I'm dealing with very smart players. These are smart people. They don't get there. You know, when you deal with some of these people, you're dealing with high level intellect, very high IQ people. These are not Jasmine Crockett and her group. These are smart people. These are really smart people and violent people and vicious people and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. If I didn't do what I did, we would have been hit. If they had that bomb at either time, 5 years ago or 7 months ago, if they had that bomb would have been used almost immediately.
Will it be necessary to use even a limited ground force to secure whatever nuclear material remains in Iran as part of that threat?
Yeah.
And secondly, have you made a decision?
You mean to go in and get it?
Yes, sir.
Why would I tell you a thing like that?
And secondly, sir, do you still plan to travel to Beijing at the end of this?
I don't know. We're working on that right now.
So that's a yes. We're definitely sending in ground forces, even though Israel is there. And really, this is, let's be honest, this is their fight, not ours. We're sending in our ground forces.
We're speaking to China. I'd love to, but because of the war, I want to be here. There's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. And we're not going to put...
I hate when I do that. Y'all have seen me do that probably so many times on this show. I wanted to pause it there because right there, you heard the president call it a war. It's a war. We got a war going on. We can't make this appointment because we got a war going on. I thought this was a military operation, Mr. President. No, it's a war. We got a war going on.
Voted against the saving of our children from transgender. And that like 38 million ballots.
Okay.
And her group.
My apologies, y'all. I went way too far forward. I'll go a little bit farther back. Okay, so we talked about the Strait, talked about oil and gas. Here we go.
It's a very high level chess, the highest. and I'm dealing with very smart players. These are smart people. They don't get there. When you deal with some of these people, you're dealing with high-level intellect, very high IQ people. These are not Jasmine Crockett and her group. These are smart people. These are really smart people, and violent people, and vicious people, and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. If I didn't do what I did, we would have been hit. If they had that bomb at either time, 5 years ago or 7 months ago, if they had that bomb would have been used almost immediately.
Will it be necessary to use even a limited ground force to secure whatever nuclear material remains in Iran as part of that threat?
Yeah.
And secondly, have you made a decision?
You mean to go in and get it?
Yes, sir.
Why would I tell you a thing like that?
And secondly, sir, do you still plan to travel to Beijing at the end of this?
I don't know. We're working on that right now. We're speaking to China. I'd love to, but because of the war, I want to be here. There's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. So it could be that we delay it a little bit.
So we're delaying a little bit because I've got a war going on, not a military operation. So if you've got a war going on, Mr. President, that requires an act of Congress. That requires that you get the approval of the American people. Now, look, we all have our opinions on Congress and what they do for us, or rather don't do for us and do for themselves, but technically, they are supposed to represent the people. So before we use our vast array of military options, you got to make sure the people want to do it, because it's the people whose kids are going in. It's the people who paid for the stuff. But they can bypass all that by calling him a terrorist. I think the Patriot Act needs some review. What do you all think? I want to be debated says also Israel has very well-trained soldiers. They don't need us until they do. Yeah, absolutely. Every citizen in Israel, unless this has changed recently, has to serve 2 years in the military. And many of them make it a permanent thing. And they're badass. They have some special forces there that could absolutely compete with some of our special forces, 100%. Y'all heard of the 7-day war, the week-long war or whatever? It was like every country around Israel was attacking them, and they defeated them all in a matter of days. So they've got some backbone. Why do our troops need to go into Iran? Why do our kids' lives need to be risked? There has to be a good reason for that, right? I don't know. President Trump is keeping it a secret. Oh, no, he's not. He's saying it's because of nukes, which is bullshit. Y'all, if you haven't realized by now, I think that is a line of bullshit. And just like Iraq, there are other mitigating factors here that have the president on this journey of toppling Iran with Israel.
Not much, Peter.
When you say Cuba is next.
Cuba.
Is Cuba, whatever you do with the military there, it seems like something. Will that look more like Iran or Venezuela?
Can't tell you that. I can tell you that they're talking to us. It's a failed nation. They have no money, they have no oil, they have no nothing. They have nice land. They have nice landscape, It's a beautiful island.
How creepy is that? That the real estate mogul guy who became president, who is referring to a third now. This would be the third war he would be launching us into against Cuba, second in the Caribbean. And he's joking about how they have nice island property. I mean, it's right in our faces, y'all. Like, he's giving us the finger. They're laughing about it. He's having a ball behind the scenes, I promise. It's very unsettling. So we're going to go after, and he said it after Venezuela, Cuba was next. He said it. What's the plan, Stan? What's the deal, dude? Is it world domination for Trump? Is that what we're trying to accomplish with President Trump? I don't know. It's a big mystery. He treats it like it's a television show. You'll have to find out in next week's episode if President Trump invades Cuba or not. It's a big secret. But if he calls them terrorists, he can do whatever he wants. It's kind of how that works. Incredible. So, obviously, things aren't going fantastic for President Trump on the Iran front here a few weeks in. He's not getting any help from our allies. Our allies are not assisting with the Strait of Hormuz. He could not get the UK to even send a minesweeper ship before our operation against the Iranian Navy, and he was definitely not happy with that, and let that be known at a press conference. None of these nations want anything to do with this war, except Israel. And, the typical ass-kissing nations. But none of the nations that really have a say in things or are one of the more powerful nations, they don't want anything to do with it. So that's something to consider. Now we've got Trump on Capitol Hill trying to do the SAVE Act. And he has told Congress that even though we're in the middle of a war, until the SAVE Act comes across his desk, he's not signing anything into law. Let's hear how that's working out for him.
Republicans go the opposite way. If Donald Trump appointed me, I'm going to show the world that I can be totally just and I can be independent of Donald Trump. He's not controlling me. And I don't want to control them. I just want to have smart decisions. They gave us a decision on tariffs the other day that won't change tariffs. I can do it a different way. I always knew I could do it a different way. This was a little quicker, a little easier, a little better. But they gave it a decision that could cost this country $500 billion to pay people back. Because now I have to start the tariffs all over again. Very simple. And what happens with the money I've already collected? Why didn't they say, starting from now, go the other way? $500 billion, perhaps. It's so sad. But one thing about the Democrats, they stick together like glue. They impeached me twice for absolute.
So he's going to go off on this other story because he lost there. But if you missed it, the money that Trump was bragging about, all the billions of dollars in tariff money. Oh, I got so much money. We got so much money coming in from these tariffs, tariff. We got so much money coming in. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And not only did they say you can't do that, they said you need to give back what you've taken because you can't do that. And so that means, of course, that it's because the Supreme Court is, Democrat-led or whatever. Do sides even matter anymore? It doesn't seem like it.
Absolutely no reason, unanimously. Fortunately, the Republicans stuck together, and it was something. It was pretty wild. But the Democrats have horrible policy, transgender for everybody, open borders, men playing in women's sports. But the one thing they do have is they stick together, no matter how bad the policy. It's embarrassing to watch them try to defend it. And in a way, I say, as a Republican, I say, thank goodness they have bad policy, because you'd never beat them. We have something in there now, the Save America Act. Voter ID with a picture, right? That's a 99% issue. Even among Democrats, Democrats poll at 89% on that. And then they have proof of citizenship. And then they have no mail-in ballots. No mail-in ballots. We have no mail-in. You go to California, they send out like 38 million ballots. Some Democrats got 7, 8 ballots. Jimmy Carter, probably the greatest thing he ever did. I thought he was a nice man, not a great president, to put it mildly. How did his attack work out in Iran? Not too good. I think ours is slightly better, wouldn't you say? But Jimmy Carter, the one thing he did after he left with Scoop Jackson and some others, they formed a very elite council, a committee that came out and said very strongly, no mail-in ballots, because we're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots like we do. The only country in the whole world. People have tried it. France tried it, and they went away. They're now doing paper ballots, watermark paper, which is very hard to cheat. So when you look at what happens with this country, we really have to fix it. That'll be very popular. The other thing we put in there, just as best of, I call it the best of Trump. We have the 3 things I just said, right? But then I added on no men playing in women's sports, and I added in no transgender surgery, the mutilation of our children. We have no mutilation of our children, no transgender. The problem is we have a couple of Republicans. They shouldn't be allowed. They're horrible people, and they're willing to vote against anything. And we have all the Democrats will vote against it. So I think it hurts the Democrats to vote against it, because I'm going to instruct all the Republicans to say that so-and-so that they're running against voted against the saving of our children from transgender mutilation, right? That's pretty unpopular. They want men and women's sports. That's pretty unpopular. They want voter ID, but the Democrats don't. Everybody wants voter ID. Everybody wants proof of citizenship. And most people don't want mail-in voting because they know it's a fraud. And the interesting thing is that way not only with the Republicans, I'm not talking about leadership, I'm talking about they're that way also, most importantly, with the people. The people of our country want voter ID. The people of our country want proof of citizenship. And that includes 88%, 89% of Democrats. And I think the Republicans, Eric Schmidt, Rick Scott, Tim Scott, I speak to so many of them, they all want it. I hope John Thune can get it across the line. He's trying. I mean, he told me this morning, I spoke to him, he's trying.
All right, so there you see it there. The SAVE Act would require proof of citizenship before you cast your vote. You would need to show a passport, birth certificate, or naturalization papers if you were an immigrant. And, to a lot of folks, they say that seems, pretty reasonable ask. You can't do a lot of things without having some form of ID. And I would agree. It's just that I hate that sentence sometimes. It's much more complicated in that some folks on the fringes literally maybe can't afford to get some of these things in order. And I know you hear the argument, well, how are they getting through life if they don't have an ID and so on and so forth? I get it. Not how you would live your life, but some people do live their life that way. And does that mean that they should not be entitled to a vote? I don't know. I don't think that's what that means. I think that if you are a citizen and I don't think you need one of these things, passport, birth certificate, or naturalization papers, right? Those might be difficult to produce. But what may be easier to produce is like an ID, right? Just a regular state ID, a frickin' library card. I mean, something to show that you're a citizen. So I'm not completely opposed to the SAVE Act, but I'm going to have to look at the details, and it may need some fine tuning, because we don't want Americans that want to vote not be able to vote because for whatever reason they don't have some piece of paperwork that they, maybe never had. You just don't know people's living situations. I've been surprised sometimes at some of the situations people have been in that I've known.
Gavin Newsom has admitted that he has learning disabilities. Honestly, I'm all for people with learning disabilities, but not for my president. I think a president should not have learning disabilities, okay? And I know it's highly controversial to say such a horrible thing. The President of the United States, Gavin Newsom, admitted that he has learning disabilities, dyslexia, everything about him is dumb. But then he looked at the audience and said, but I'm smarter than you, or something like that. That was pretty simple. So now on top of everything else, I call him a racist because it happened to be a black audience. I will tell you this. I think it was the worst interview I've ever seen of any human being in my life, okay?
All right. I don't have virtue signal here or anything. I just want to say that folks with disabilities, learning disabilities in particular, are not dumb. They're not dumb. They have a learning disability. It's just like if you weren't able to balance correctly or had some physical disability. You couldn't, didn't have use of your legs or something. Doesn't mean you're dumb. Doesn't make you less of a person. And I hope to see some kind of acknowledgement and apology from the president on this. I doubt we will, because we never have. I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom, that's for sure. But I know people that have had learning disabilities. I know people that are permanently disabled, and being dumb, having a low IQ, doesn't have anything to do with it. So I really did not like seeing that from the president. But again, we've seen him make fun of a disabled person before he was even president, and I thought that was pretty shocking. But it appears people don't seem to mind too much about him doing these things. Okay, so this is from YouTube. This is from CNBC. This was a stream the president did yesterday evening. So this was after the presser that we just watched. This is him answering some additional questions about Iran as more news obviously develops throughout the day.
They have been literally obliterated. The Air Force is gone. The Navy is gone. Many ships have been sunk. They're warfighting ships, but I guess they didn't know how to use them. And anti-aircraft is decimated. Their radar is gone, and their leaders are gone. Other than that, they're doing quite well. They've been a terror for 47 years. And now, I guess, the world, through the United States, with the help of Israel, is doing what should have been done many years ago. Should have been done many years ago. Since the beginning of the conflict, we've struck more than 7,000 targets across Iran, and these have been mostly commercial and military targets. We've achieved a 90% reduction in their ballistic missile launches and a 95% reduction in drone attacks. The missiles are trickling in now at very low levels because they don't have too many missiles left. We've also attacked the manufacturing plants, where the places where they manufacture the missiles and the drones, and that's going on today. We just hit 3 of them today. It's getting very hard for them to manufacture. More than 100 Iranian naval vessels have been sunk or destroyed over the last week and a half. It has to be some kind of a record. Additional strikes continue to launch from all directions every single hour. As you know, we attacked Carg Island and knocked it literally, destroyed everything on the island except for the area where the oil is. I call it the pipes. We left the pipes. We didn't want to do that, but that we will do that. We can do that on 5 minutes notice. It'll be over. But for purposes of someday rebuilding that country, I guess we did the right thing. But it may not stay that way. Just one simple word and the pipes will be gone too, but it'll take a long time to rebuild that. We are aggressively dismantling Iran's defense industrial base, and ability to rebuild its missiles and drone capability is getting down to close to zero. And we're hammering their capacity to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, with more than 30 mine-laying ships destroyed. We hit, to the best of our knowledge, all of their mine-laying ships. Now they can put them on other types of ships, I guess, and drop them in. But we don't know that any have even been dropped in. We're not sure that any have been. That's a big negative for them if they do it. It's a form of suicide. But we don't know that they have dropped any in. But we've hit all 30 of their ships and destroyed them. They're all at the bottom of the sea. We strongly encourage other nations whose economies depend on the Strait far more than ours. You know, we get less than 1% of our oil from the Strait, and some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%. China gets 90%. Many of the Europeans get quite a bit. South Korea gets 35%. So we want them to come and help us with the Strait. We have it in very good shape. The countries, I said, we've already taken care of Iran, but now, because of the fact that literally
I think that's interesting to be asking for help, because I swear, like last week, he actually said into a camera, like, we don't need your help. We're fucking America. We're badass. We don't need nobody's help. And here he is asking for another country's help to monitor the Strait of Hormuz and make sure that ships can get through there without being attacked. And he's making the case saying, well, since y'all get so much oil from this strait, you should help police it. And I know I watched one of the German ambassadors earlier say, like, we didn't start this war, so no, we're not going to help you police the mess that you made. You didn't get any sign-off from anyone. So, yeah, you're talking all that shit. You're on your own. You don't need anybody. Well, this is what happens. Nobody comes.
A single terrorist can put something in the water or shoot something or shoot a missile, a small missile, and it's fairly close range because it is a tight area, and which is one of the reasons they've always used that as a weapon. Iran has always used that as an economic weapon, and it's not going to be able to be used very long. Numerous countries have told me they're on the way. Some are very enthusiastic about it, and some aren't. Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me. We have some countries where we have 45,000 soldiers, great soldiers, protecting them from harm's way. And we have done a great job. And when we want to know, do you have any minesweepers? Well, would rather not get involved, sir. I said, for 40 years we're protecting you, and you don't want to get involved in something that is very minor. Very few shots going to be taken because they don't have many shots left. But they said, would rather not get involved. I just want the fake news media and everybody else to remember that that was said, because I've been a big critic of all of the protecting of countries, because I know that we'll protect them. And if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've just known that for a long period of time, just like I knew about the Strait, that it would be a weapon, which I predicted a long time ago, predicted all of this stuff. You guys were very generous in that. I predicted all of it. I predicted Osama bin Laden would knock out the World Trade Center. I made that prediction a year before he did it. I said, you better get him. He's a bad guy. I watched him be interviewed one time, and I said, that's a bad guy. You better get him. 1 year before, exactly. I wrote it in a book. You can even check. About a year before the World Trade Center then came down, President Clinton actually had a shot at him, and he didn't take it. Unfortunately, I'm not blaming him for that, but he didn't take it. And he ended up knocking down the World Trade Center, but I predicted that too. I predicted a lot of things. We strongly encourage other nations whose economies depend on the Strait for blood. I mean, these people literally need it. 95% of their energy or their oil comes out of the Strait, and they should be in here very happily helping us. And it's incredible. We have such great, we're number one in oil by double now. We drill, baby, drill. We're double any other nation, and it's going to be soon triple any other nation. And that doesn't include Venezuela, who's been great. By the way, the relationship with Venezuela has been fantastic. Millions, literally millions of barrels of oil are being taken out, and it's been a great help, and it's been to their great benefit. The president has done a really good job.
Ever since we've taken out Venezuela and taken over all of their oil that we didn't have to put any money into harvesting, things are great on that front. We're getting all kinds of money for it. It's weird. It's crazy.
We get along with them really well. But we've taken out millions of barrels of oil and brought to Houston and other places to the refineries. We have refineries set up specifically for that. And it's been a great relationship, and more and more is happening. It's a tremendous oil source, and we're stepping it up very rapidly. The big companies are going in, and they will actually, numbers in a pretty short period of time, numbers that they've never been able to do, we'll be doing. There's a lot of oil under that land. We strongly encourage the other nations to, again,
my apologies, y'all. I was muted. So this is one thing I've noticed with Donald Trump as I've been kind of prepping for this little video. Because like I said, I don't typically cover just the news. So trying to be, unbiased, even though that's really impossible if you study how biases works. But doing my best to be aware of it and avoid it, and being as objective as I can. And the things that I came away with from these two conferences yesterday, these two interactions with President Trump yesterday, is one, at the very least, I think the president needs to get some rest. There were moments during that interview where I was actually concerned for his well-being. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not trying to, push the boundaries and be shocking or whatever. It's my honest opinion. It just seems like the president could use some rest. Knowing how he operates this is the president that would tweet at 3 a.m. in his previous presidency. So we know that sleep is not necessarily a priority for him. It must not be. But in this case, he's rambling a lot. He's repeating himself a lot. He's saying things over and over and over again. And it's just getting weird. It's just getting weird to listen to. Other things I've been concerned about is, we haven't gotten into this at all yet, but it has been concerning, as these federal troops getting deployed all around the country. So you have federal troops getting deployed all around the country. President Trump has been making threats to some journalists and reporters. Even Don Lemon was arrested while, he says covering a story. Law enforcement says he was being disruptive and interrupting people's right to worship. I didn't really dive into that because to be honest, I don't like Don Lemon, so I didn't really care. But perhaps I should, because if the president is having media personalities he doesn't like arrested, and we're getting federal troops deployed to more and more and more cities, and the guy has let this power go to his head to where he thinks it's okay to just yank leaders of countries out of their bed at night and kidnap them and declare war without Congress's approval against Iran. Say what you want about George W. Bush, at least he got approval before declaring war. At least he kept the facade up, if that's what it is, that the American people matter, that our opinions and our voices matter. What a crazy, crazy time we find ourselves in, friends. And hold on to your seatbelts, because I don't know that it gets better from here. Usually things get worse before they get better. I think Trump believes he can have this thing in Iran wrapped up before he even leaves his presidency. I think in his head, he thinks that when he leaves the White House, Iran's going to be one of his greatest accomplishments. But if we look at how Iraq worked out, when you create this power vacuum in a country where brutal things have happened before, to fill that vacuum, to get that power, it's concerning. It could be much worse than Iraq. Iraq didn't even fight. Do y'all remember? We were dropping leaflets over their military bases about how to park their tanks and angle the barrels so we knew they were surrendering. I mean, they were throwing up white flags, throwing us their weapons, giving up without a shot fired. Iran has launched up to 1,200 missiles, mostly at U.S. bases around the area, since this started on February 20th. They are fighting back, even without their leader. They prepared for a situation like this, that Israel and America would take out their leaders, and their military will have to go on fighting for as long as they can. We've taken out 90% of their long-range weapons. That's great. We've taken out a couple of their leaders. I'm not sure how I feel about that because it's, again, who do you have left to negotiate with? But at some point, we're going to have to go in there on foot and figure out what's what and try to get things organized. Volunteers aren't going to do it. Well, volunteers are going to do it. It's going to be volunteers that volunteered for our military. That's who's going to do it. And they're going to deal with an insurgency that will make the insurgency in Iraq look like the diet version. And it will last a long time. A lot longer than like a couple years. Oy, oy, oy. All right, well, that's our news update from last night. I wish it was all positive and happy and rainbows, but we're in the middle of a war. And we got a president that's willing to start another with Cuba before we even know if this one's what's happening with this one. It's crazy. The guy that said he didn't want any war hates wars. Wars are stupid. Forget wars. Now we're going to be fighting on 3 fronts? Possibly 4. You know what happens if we get completely stretched thin? Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, the Caribbean in general, helping Israel. And then China decides to invade Taiwan. We're going to be too busy to help. Sorry, Taiwan. We need to just stop drug dealers and terrorists in Iran. I don't know how that helps the U.S., but okay. I just hope in 10, 20 years, all the classified shit comes out and we can start seeing what was really going on here, because what we're being told about why these wars are being fought is clearly not why these wars are being fought. That's why so much of it doesn't make any sense. So you're not alone here on this late night trying to see if you can get any extra perspective on this Iran war. There's a lot of people feeling like that because it just doesn't make much sense. And if you got a little son or a little daughter, you don't want to raise them in a country where they could be drafted as soon as they graduate to fight a war for some oil billionaire. Fuck that. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I want to be debated. I loved your comments. Thank you for hanging all the way through. You're a real champ. And for the rest of you that are here, thank you so much for hanging out. Don't forget, hit the like and subscribe. That really helps out the algo, helps out the channel. And I really appreciate it. So have a good evening. And I will see you next time on the Gabriel Speaks Podcast.